Greetings, this is Content Evolution New World, and today Mike and I are going to be talking about and asking you to join a conversation about smart environments. This is a topic that has been of interest to both of us for years now, but we haven't actually shared our thinking in this forum. So it's high time that we did that, Mike.
Absolutely.
And so I'll just kind of frame this up that this is about moving from a world where you need devices. You need to have something in your pocket. You need to have something in your hand or on your face or otherwise to experience the benefits of being part of a networked world and being able to get access to things that you want to have happen either informationally or happen in the environment around you. All right. A lot of people have some smart home things where you can control your lighting or your window blinds or your TV or whatever, right, from the convenience of your smartphone. But that all used to be separate devices, right? I remember, Mike, when the first smart home companies started to come out, it was there were separate controllers. You had
Correct.
to have, it kind of looked more like the controller for your stereo system or for your television set or your cable box, right? That it was kind of like, okay, the A button is connected to your lighting, right? And your B button is connected to, something else, right? I even go back to, those old television commercials, the clapper, right? Where
Correct.
you could, clap your hands and the light, would turn on and off because it was, it would hear, right, that you were making a sound. In any event, um, that's not what we're talking about. I mean, although historically that's where we were. We're talking about not needing the devices going forward. Um, you've written about this, Mike. So just share your first blush, and then I'll go into a little bit more about my hypothesis. But actually, I'll just say it right now. I want to go into augmentation. You can use augmented reality if you want to, but I want to skip having to hold or wear stuff, right? And move directly into an environment that's responsive to what I need and is smart as I move from home to conveyance to office and otherwise. So there you go.
Yeah. No, I mean, you every time we have this conversation and that we've had, and I don't know for how many years we've had it, um, I have to say I kind of get brought up short because if I don't have a device that allows me to personally, now this is me as an individual, have that device that is in fact that token, it's the signal, it's the thing that to me, my switch of wherever when I'm engaged and augmenting myself or my experiences through connect networks of information and communication. To me, that's probably always going to be a thing where I want the thing that allows me to say, no, I'm not. Right. And carrying the device around with me is my personal signal to say everything's off or I'm minimum contact because I'm busy doing something that I don't want to be interrupted about. And I still think it's going to be a while that we've now gone into this phase that as you kind of alluded to earlier, where we walk around, many of us with our, down the street on hikes, with our face buried in a phone. They're probably, for many of those people, that might be something very important that they're doing while they're hiking out down by the beach or whatever. But what do I know? They could be a lot of virtual workers like us conducting a meeting while they're walking, and that's great. But to me, that is both a signal to the individual and still is a signal to somebody else, right? That, hey, I'm otherwise engaged. That might be considered rude, but it's still a signal, right? A visual signal. And the reason I kind of get brought up short is like you're not saying it, but the next phase is this something that's implantable in me? And I kind of have an aversion to that. I already have 2 artificial joints, right? So I guess I might take an implanted computer if it would continually upgrade the joints, so I would never have to get them replaced again. That would be neat.
Hmm.
But I think there's still going to be this issue of the signal, right? The visual thing to what to us to us as an individual as well as to others. I've got to think now. I would say again, I would say, Kevin, part of that transition away from a device that is commands our attention that we have to physically pick up and hold up um, is that there's going to be that kind of interim where we are now. I think with what we saw with Apple Intelligence, right, where we finally have a smart assistant with us,
Mm-hmm.
and how I invoke my personal assistant, I think for a lot of us is going to be a psychological barrier, meaning the device, right? That I know now I'm initiating, or a request or something to Siri, as opposed to just thinking it. That sounds great, but I'm just worried about the hardware that's required to get us there.
Yeah.
But I think that notion, though, that's why I was so struck by Apple Intelligence, because you helped me kind of reviewed and discussed with me a thing I thought was kind of an important presentation I did
Yeah.
several years ago. And I think that we're finally there, right, with this device. I would push it back to you is how do we as individuals get away from this notion of the physical device, my phone or my watch, does more than just kind of provide that connection.
Sure.
Uh, and
Yeah.
I'm curious, am I worried too much about implants? Should I just get over it?
Well, I think it's just a matter of, it's a progression of modalities. This is like the Russian doll set, where they nest inside of each other.
Mhm.
And, um, there was a concept that we had, uh, when I was still working in corporate strategy and design,
Mhm.
where we had a device that did communicate to the environment, but it had no screen, it had no IO in terms of your ability to, type on it or whatever. What it was I am here, and here is my personal data set. Okay. And so in smart environments, it would recognize that you were present. Um, kind of the way that fobs work for, getting into your car and so on and so forth.
Right.
Uh, and let me just respond to your, uh, that's really Schneider. So,
Oh, okay.
so we're
No,
delighted to
but
have him with us.
almost on point for what we're talking about, right? Because
Yeah, exactly. I
in
mean,
my
it's the real
situation,
Schneider.
my resistance or concern
I know. I saw your.
misses the benefit, right? Which is if that was not really Schneider,
Yeah,
but his bot,
yeah.
as long as
So
he asked
I'm.
permission, we'd
Yeah.
be fine, right? And that's cool. Anyhow, sorry, I just wanted to
So,
note it.
so the point, Mike sent me a text that says, is it okay? It's not okay in these calls to have, bots, all right? But, in this case, Mike was saying, is it okay for Schneider's bot to be in here? And it's like, it's not, it's really Schneider, it's no.
But
So so all right, but back to, this device that I was describing is that it was all about the personal area network, right?
right,
And it was all about, signaling, I'm here, here's the data set, and you would have to give the environment permission to access, you would say, okay, now you can go and, talk to it at this level, right? And, there would be a handshake and blah, 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 it would happen.
right,
We we prototyped it up to a point, and then, we were getting into a business model change where the company wasn't interested in devices and was headed toward becoming a B2B company. And, we just stopped doing that prototype. But I wanted to tell you that um, there is a slippery slope here between, how much do I want to share and the privacy concerns and, kinds of things we're talking about versus, how much do I trust? It's like telling your land, do you trust this computer? Right?
Right.
Or is this public? Right? And, so inside my home or inside my office, more trusted environments. Yes, the handshake is okay. Um, Out in public, not so much. Could that get micro miniaturized into its subdermal? Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
The stuff that we're talking about with, Elon Musk's Neuralink company, can you start to put the interface, right into, the communication center of the brain, right? So that we can, interact with systems that way. Yeah. It, I think that that's better off right now in the early cases, in universal design, that for people that have some kind of impairment and can't
Yep.
do something, that the opt-in makes sense because this re-enables them in some, or enables them for the first time in some positive way. And then the rest of us, would benefit, later on. I'm not sure in my lifetime that I would opt in for a neural implant, because I'm just too old iron. But I already said that when they have a chip, an RFID kind of chip that would allow me to just walk through the gate of the airport that says, it's Kevin, we know him, right? I'm ready to do that. Okay. I was ready to do that, um, instead of wearing a badge, right? That,
Well, they have facial recognition now, so they
I
can
know,
do
I'm just
it.
saying that, well, security, Doug, is, composed of something that I know, like a password, something that I am, which is biometric, all right, in nature, a fingerprint, an eye scan, a facial, this is me,
Right,
and something that I own, like a fob.
Have.
Okay,
Right.
that I,
right,
it's like those are keys. Okay,
right,
physical keys. Okay, all right. So the most secure systems in the world use all three.
right,
Mhm.
As they say, you've got to have a password and you have to biometrically map up and you got to have something physically. And if you have all three, you can get in here and, do whatever it is that
Right.
you need to get done. I think that, in these smart environments, we are likely to be using all three simultaneously.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Doug, you've joined the conversation. Suzanne, we're glad to have you. Schneider, let's just go ahead and open up. Where's your imagination taking you? Because, I started a business years ago, that closed, and I opened it, and I'm notorious for starting things that are too far ahead of their time, and the market isn't ready. This was about using telepresence, not what we're doing here, but, me showing up full size, right, with high definition, sound and video, to be able to teach university classes, with the best professors, but distributed to classrooms around the planet. That was called EduPresence. And, EduPresence was a really cool idea. But, you know, now, a decade later, while the technology exists, we still don't do it, right? We choose not to operate that way. And there were some cultural impediments, and there were some things like the professors didn't want to teach that way. Okay,
Right.
well, there you go. Technology enablement, but, cultural impediment.
Yeah, well, we're still not to the point where, the virtual is indistinguishable from the physical. There's still a little bit difference. And like I spent a lot of time in VR. I got real excited about that in 21. And I tried with KU School of Nursing to try to make this work. But I still think we're like 5 to 7 years away from this technology really taking off, is my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at other interfaces like holograms
Yeah.
at one point, and interestingly enough, the most famous first imprint hologram that people remember is Princess Leia in Star Wars, shows up because R2-D2 is projecting, her in front of,
Right.
and when we exposed people to what was, instead of having an LCD screen in front of you, what if you had a hologram projection, that was in front of you? What people were reporting, that was kind of an imprint from prehistoric past, is that's a ghost. Okay. All right. So the translucent nature, the fact that it wasn't completely solid, all right, was bringing back, this ancient, kind of more tribal thing, right, which is that's creepy. All right. And I don't want it, take it away. So we never pursued any hologram technology, even though it was possible on a battery to make holograms, right, in devices, right? We just said, no, if we're going to creep people out, forget it. All right.
Yeah.
You can put, by the way, you can put 30 Celine Dion's on stage in Las Vegas. All right. But using that Cisco technology, she appears to be solid because of the way that they do the staging. It's a very
Right.
intricate, it's like, which one is real? All right. But in mobile computing, there is no opportunity to actually, create that illusion. So
Yeah. I do think, like, in fact, they just showed well, go ahead, Suzanne.
I would, along with what you said, Kevin, about the three factors, and my son is you've met Trevor, and he's he's a criminologist by training, and we all came up with a safe word, like something that would be completely out of the context in which, to really know, like if I were to be kidnapped or something, right? And and it's just my son's asked a question and I give an answer. I mean, it hasn't happened, of course, but a very special phrase or a very special word that I do identify that it's really me, and it has no association with me whatsoever.
I mean, when you watch Oppenheimer, he, says, give this message to my wife, bring in the clothes or the laundry. All right. And, that was the, hey, it worked, signal. And then when he, didn't make it through I think he said, keep the clothes in the hamper, or whatever it was, right? Because, that didn't go well. All right. That they had their little secret phrase.
Yeah. I don't know, just an
added so I don't know. Someone was telling me the story that their son, who's in their 20s or 30s, had a deep fake of their sister to their mom. And so for a while the mom was falling for it, and I think this person was a technologist as well, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this doesn't seem right. So, especially, that's the thing is, do you have someone who really knows you well that wants to impersonate someone else? Now this person was, because it was the son who was trying to mess with his mom and sister.
Yeah. I'm going to take you to the next, because when all of you have had, cursory exposure to, marketing theory, which is that, you're not actually selling the functional benefit. You're selling like second or third order benefit that, you don't want the deodorant because,
you stink.
Smell better. It's because I'd like to be socially acceptable, right, to others, and I'd like to get the girl, or if you're a man, right? That now I have presented myself in a way that I can achieve that higher level goal. Here's the reason that I think that this is that moving in the direction that I'm discussing is important, from a cultural and sociological point of view. Is we have decided as a species that we can just pick ourselves up and go to wherever we need to go to work or to relocate ourselves, that we're, in many, many cases, you see a new generation of people who would prefer to not even own property, right? That they would prefer to just, be completely detached from property. Hey, I'm going to live, in Paris, for a few months, and I'm going to go over to Tokyo or whatever. And they're decoupled from, me. I'm sitting here, living on a piece of property that I've had for 27 years. I like it. I like being, having a place to come back to. All right. But, well, some people don't. What that has done is it's also decoupled us from a number of important relationships that we used to have when, we were co-located as extended families, right? Or that you had relationships that were deeply built in a neighborhood, right? And
Right.
what I would, suggest to you is we can build those relationships for a lifetime if we had the ability to have those remain in contact with those people in more intimate ways, right? Virtually, right? That we'd actually modeled in the EduPresence business hey, look, that wall is, when you're looking at it, it's the other side of the planet. That's Tokyo, and we're here in North Carolina. Let's have a meal with each other, right? Well, it's breakfast for Japan and it's dinner for us, or vice versa, because we're halfway across the world. But the fact is, conversations become different when you're sharing a meal with someone than when you're in other settings, right? And it is possible, to if you watch the CBS program Blue Bloods, I don't know, but a feature of that program is they come together for that they're more about the characters because they have Sunday dinner with each other, right, all the time, right?
Mhm.
And how many of us have the opportunity to have that kind of regular meal with people that are important with us? Well, maybe that's just an artifact of the past. I think it's worth retrieving, but the way that you retrieve it is with this technology, right?
Mhm.
And I think that becomes, now you can choose the relationships that you want to have over an extended period of time and over extended distances without the need to be in a particular place. So that's a thesis that I have of why this is important.
Well, I do think in the next, 3 to 5 years, 7 years, we will get to the technology where you'll be putting on a pair of glasses. In fact, there's
I don't want to
AWE.
put the glasses on.
What's that?
I'm not gonna,
You have glasses. We all have. Oh, well,
yeah,
Suzanne.
go ahead.
doesn't.
Say
Oh,
more.
no, I have them too. I just don't wear them.
Okay, keep going. I made an assumption that I shouldn't have made. Keep going.
Yeah. So, well, in fact, AWE, they had a conference and they were just showing that they now have 150
That's where
brand
Beharin is.
devices. Right. And it's something called split rendering where so like right now, people, they reach for their phone 340 times a day, right? A lot of times just text messages, right? Now, we have an Apple Watch, if you have an Apple Watch, you can see your text message on your watch. So you look down at your watch,
Right.
to see what's going on. But what happens when these glasses now will show a quick message, right? But this goes back to, okay, am I distracting? Like, if all of a sudden I got a text message right now and it says, okay, then I'm focusing on that and not on this conversation, right? So this is the danger, is that we can have multitasking as well. Now the thing is, what happens when we have AI? So you're having a conversation with your significant other, and then you get distracted, and then the AI kind of gives a warning saying, okay, your boyfriend, your wife, gave you this information, you better answer. Oh, and here's the suggested answer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that we do see evidence that uh, whether there's good evidence to support that people can do it well, right, I'm not sure is there, but people are multitasking more, right?
Yeah.
And I think the first time I actually was exposed to this that was poignant was back when Docomo had the first apps, right, in Japan, and they were before they came to the United States, right? And I
Right.
think that the first smartphone, IBM Simon had something called features, all right, that you could download, to give it functionality. But let's just accept that apps are the,
Right.
right thing. Is people had two phones in their hands, okay, on the subway in Japan, right? And so one was kind of like instant messaging or whatever, and the other was a game or was something else, and they were doing both, right? It was kind of like you've got two hands, why not two
Right.
phones, right? And
Uh-huh.
we never, I've never seen that in the United States, okay? I know
I
people
see
that
it a
own
bunch
more
in
than one
Europe.
phone, but they don't use them simultaneously, right?
Yes. Everybody I know, person in Europe has two phones, right? But they're not both out at the same time.
In Japan, they were out at the same time.
Yeah,
It was
I
kind of
do
like,
remember that.
oh,
Yeah.
I said, this is really interesting. Did not move across the pond, and
No.
but Doug, we know that it's possible to do that because we've seen it, right?
Right.
And I went to an MIT Media Lab gathering now almost 2 decades ago, right, when Nicholas Negroponte was still the first director of the lab, and I was on an advisory board. The At this thing, there was your badge had your name, and it had 5 LED lights at the bottom, right? And what you did was you went in and you would dip, there was a question on a bucket, a bucket suspended from the ceiling. And if you agreed with the statement, you would dip your badge into the bucket and it would encode it, all right, saying, Kevin agrees with that, all right? And, this was just part of the training for that badge as you came in. And then as you went around and met people, your badge would light up, right? In terms of, hey, guess what? I can see that we have, 3 things in common that we agree with, right? And
Right.
so you'd be able to strike up interesting conversations with, well, I don't know how interesting they were.
One could strike up conversations.
But it was a
no adjective.
conversation starter, right? This is, real time. There's a real-time dating app again in Japan where if 2 mobile phones were enabled the right way and they came into proximity to each other, they say, hey, you know what? You two have something in common, right? Japanese, very shy. This was an opportunity, to strike up a conversation, to increase dating opportunities. Well, again, haven't seen that. I've seen the no business card, that you
Right.
just, bump. What was it? That was what it was called, right? Wasn't it called bump?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. I don't see
Well,
anybody doing that
whenever
anymore.
I meet someone or I'm going to meet someone, I look them up on LinkedIn, especially if it's a business relationship. And, it's like, okay, who are they? Who do they know that I know? That kind of stuff, just so,
Yeah.
Looking for those human connections.
Yeah. So this is the, I would have a meal with Mike any day. But I just don't have the technology that would allow that to actually be an interesting experience because there just isn't enough presence, okay,
Uh-huh.
to pull it
Oh,
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think we'll have that. The interesting thing on Zoom, I don't like to be eating on Zoom. Like if we shared a meal, and I think the reason is I don't like to see myself eat, right? I don't mind you're putting food in your mouth, but for
But
some reason when I see
that was
myself
the
put food
whole
in my
thing
mouth,
about that portal that we designed, is you didn't see yourself eating. You only
yeah,
saw the other folks, and
Right.
the table was the same table in the United States and Japan. We actually designed it, and it went right up to the edge of the screen. And so, you thought that you were sitting at the same place, right? But the cameras, were pin cameras that were at eye level, going through the screen. It was great. It was a
Right.
great little trick. It was good experiments. We said, hey, we could run conferences this way or advisory groups, right? But again, just because it's possible doesn't mean it's going to take off.
Yeah, like Sprint had a $100,000 room set up because they had two campuses, and so you
Mhm.
go to one room, and then they had a screen, like it's a half round table, and then I think Cisco made the product, and then the other room and the other,
That's exactly
in
right.
Washington
Cisco
D.C.
had beautiful demo facilities of this type. I mean,
Ah,
the
Yeah,
one at
that was
headquarters.
indistinguishable. It felt like the
Oh
audio
yeah,
quality, such it felt like you were right there.
yeah.
And it was designed specifically so that it was indistinguishable of traveling.
Right.
Mhm.
Taking it cost, because a business trip, even a day business trip, especially if you spend the night,
Yeah.
is $1,500.
But by the time you spent them, because that required at the time, who knows? I don't know what it is. Um, it used to require a dedicated satellite. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And, now, the bandwidth and the compression has taken place that if you've got a fiber optic connection, it's good enough, right? To,
yeah,
drive these things. Um, but it's not just the hardware. The room has to be designed the right way with the right lighting, the right sound equipment and everything else. And by the time you're done, creating two mirrored facilities that can operate in the way that you're talking about, you've spent almost $1 million. All right.
yeah,
And so most people don't want to spend $1 million, right? To do this, your recovery time on travel and everything else, it's actually, a little bit further out than they would like in terms of, and as I said, it's kind of point to point. You would need a larger network of facilities to actually start to see, the travel go down. But,
right.
Well, Kevin,
if it's in
I,
your, yes,
I
Suzanne.
like your idea a lot. And the first thing I thought of when you started talking today was, wow, this is like having the video. Like I just reviewed a video of my husband's brother so we had a surprise birthday party, and I'm like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we were in the video? I mean, that in real time. So this would be, we're filming ourselves, but we're eating together because we were all eating. And, I just let my camera go, my video. But yeah, I like that idea though, eating together, because but it's in real time and you're in it. You're in the video rather than taking the video. So that it is mind blowing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Richard Saul Wurman, that designed TED, the original, is an architect by training. So he is trained to, how do I create, physical environments that are going to, deliver a certain kind of experience for the people who are going to live there or work there or whatever it is. And, you've seen, if you haven't been to TED, all right, but you've probably been to a TEDx because they franchised it. But the idea is, he wanted to give people short ideas and spectacles on stage, and then have long, luxurious breaks and meals, right? That when you were together, it was simply stimulus to spark discussion, right? He wanted the interaction, right? Um, his lament after he sold TED is it's become, 10-minute videos.
Yeah.
He said that's not what this, TED was designed to do, because, this is just what, you're back to, as McLuhan would say, you're back to a cool technology where you're just watching, right? Instead
Right.
of the warm technology or the hot technology of interaction, right? And he has tried to,
And Well, it's interesting
bring
you
it
bring
back
that
a
up.
couple of times.
Kevin, I don't know how many people listen to NPR, but I think it's on the weekends. Can't remember which show it is. Maybe it's How I Built This. It's one of those where, or it's TED Talks, right? It's where they actually have the subject who is giving the speech, the presentation, on as a quote interview guest. And it's like they short circuit all the background and, here's why I'm here, right? That you've now become part of this kind of TED script. And they do an interview and then they just cut into the presentation later on. And to me, Kevin, I was like, it seems like that's kind of where NPR is making a specific choice to do that, right? It's not just to like replay TED Talks. It's, I now have the person, the subject matter expertise in a real conversation. We'll intersperse it with their recorded video that turns that, I think, into something closer to, it's about the engagement with that person speaking real time with that radio show host, right? As opposed to here, let's just hit play on the TED Talk, replays that we have.
Okay,
And
so
it goes.
I'll suggest something, Mike, for us, for what we're doing right this second. All right.
Mm-hmm.
To retrieve Richard Saul Wurman's intent, all right, is we could pick, and this is based on fair use, all right, is we could pick any of the people who we're interested in that have posted something to YouTube, whether it's TED or not, all right, and do a reaction video call, right? Because
Sure.
you say, okay, here's Freeman Dyson talking about Dyson spheres, okay, and
Sure.
so you put up piece, and then we stop after
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 minutes of he's laid out the proposition of what it is. Now let's talk about that. Now he's going to tell us more, okay. That seems to be because we're adding value to the original, that's in bounds, okay, that you don't have to go and
It's
take a lot
commentary.
of permissions.
Yeah, well, what I've done is I've taken Lex Friedman and Elon Musk's transcript, it's like 3 hours long,
Right.
and I put it into Chat GPT as a GPT and like Lex Elon, and then I'm able to have an engagement of it. Like either, if I, like for instance, they talk about one Grok and
Sure.
I say, okay, expand on this, or they were talking about nuclear weapons, and it's like, and then I became part of that podcast conversation, right? So it was a way to have an AI like Friedman and AI Elon Musk, and to do that engagement.
Yeah.
And so that's text, but eventually you're going to be able to do video as well.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And we would try to do this on the side of being authentic to the speaker, as opposed to
Right.
trying to chop it up into things that the person actually didn't intend to say.
Well, yeah,
we
but
see a
I
lot
think
of that
Doug's
manipulation right now.
But I think Doug raises an interesting possibility, right? Or the scenario I was thinking, Doug, is augmenting a conversation on a call like this or in a workplace setting where somebody's like, well, okay, what would Elon Musk say about this? Right? Where you're using the tool to extend a conversation like, well, what if, in this case, well, what if Elon, X, Y, and Z? Now, we know it's not Elon, but based on the training, you'd say, well, he's more often than not, he's going to respond this way, to this
how
thing. And
close
again,
can
it's
a
not meant
digital
as
twin of Elon get to the real Elon,
well,
right?
right. We've kind of been playing around with that, right? And it's pretty close.
Well, I mean, we could use the CEGPTs as, I'm sorry, I'm speaking,
little Cody there.
content evolution, GPT profile, digital twins, full expression. We've made digital twins of about 20 of our members in content evolution, and we collectively write articles that get posted on social media, and we can respond to questions as individual agents.
And I have to work on this, Kevin, because I think it's going to be a comparison or a metaphor, an analogy that's not going to work for a whole generation of workers, if you will, knowledge workers. That's what I you know, at this point, that's how I view these GPTs. It's like kids that are listening. It used to be that you drove or took the train into a real place to do your job. That wasn't your bedroom. It was an office that you had. And one of the benefits of that, the downside is a commute, B, noise in the office, interruptions, etc. The positive is you could walk down the hall. I could say, Suzanne, you know a lot about this. I'm working on X and Y. I know you're busy, but can I just have 5 minutes? You know, 8 times out of 10, you get something when that conversation with Suzanne is like, oh, wait a minute, that's where I should be looking at. That's invaluable, right? When I first started working remotely from home like 15 years ago, that was the most important thing. It wasn't hanging out and yakking at the coffee machine. That's also nice and fun. But getting those sparks of insight because you just walk down the hall, right, is probably one of the only things I miss. Oh, and the contact with my colleagues, etc. But that ability to get somebody else, because you're stuck on something, to just like be able to walk down the hall and ask Suzanne a question.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
So
Or-
I
that's
just,
we're close
Yeah.
to that now, right? But now what I learned dealing with it when I was in the quote enterprise world is you might, as I often was, you might get bummed out if you were getting interrupted when you're really trying to like write something or get something ready for a customer. But what I found remotely, the first few years I think were more difficult because those were in the early days of some of the messaging, right? The enterprise not Slack. I mean, the old school stuff that, that insight you would get, that inspiration, you now had to weed through 35, instant message threads that were going on during the day. There's different type of interruption. And I think that's, the way I've been viewing these GPTs is like, no, this is just, it's a virtual version of me, all the disclaimers, etc. But that is kind of how I've been using them, is like, well, what if, let me bounce this idea off you, and not look for, a perfect solution or a completely 100% factually accurate response, but rather I just needed somebody else's eyes, right, or mind to look at this issue and move me on. So I'm trying to come up with a better way to describe that in a post, but it's, that ability to have an endless series of colleagues and an endless hall, right, an infinite hallway at work to get inspiration or help. That's kind of the way I've been thinking of that, Kevin. And I think when we think more about how that reacts to, or how that links back to your notion of smart environments and sense making, that's going to be that ability. I think whatever I end up calling it, is that's what's going to be one of it already is, right, one of its core values of some of these these generative AI technologies.
so Mike, I asked you, what do you think about this? All right, this is your GPT, okay? All right. So it set up the disclaimer.
Yeah.
And you're saying it represents two significant trends, each with its own trajectory and potential impact: smart devices, smart environments.
I would call it intelligent devices, though, rather than smart.
Yeah, I understand.
That's right, but I see your point. But that's yeah.
I mean, this
like
is
I
what
said,
you
to
said,
Doug's point.
okay, 60 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Or at least your digital twin said.
Yeah.
Right. And if I said, that's fun, you got that answer. But if we were going to turn that around to a prospect or a client, it's like, we both might take 5 minutes to look at it and say, make an edit like Doug suggested.
No, I understand. I'm just pointing out that,
No.
It's based on previous conversations that we have had over the last 6 years, I'd say, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
All right, so our training methodology does help a lot.
Yep.
And if Suzanne, Doug, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the Candy Ears podcast, it's on Apple. I think it was also on Spotify, but listen to Emily Shaw's thing of our experiment where she made versions of us and did voice synthesis and asked our digital twins questions, and then asked us in person to answer the question. I was asked, what is the meaning of life? All right. And it was actually pretty good. My digital twin and what I said, were remarkably similar.
Mhm.
And so I would recommend it to you. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening.
And let's tie back to earlier in the program, Kevin. You've already established the reaction video. That was the first one.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, well,
Absolutely right.
so we could be doing that for fun. Every once in a while we could do one with a historical figure, and
So
but-
Suzanne, I was actually in a what I would consider to be a stage 1 smart environment, relative to the things that you investigate at GlaxoSmithKline, which was across the street at the time, and they had a space that you could go into, which was very similar to 3-dimensional space, where you would be able to be inside the molecule that they were making, right? That it was dimensionally, around you in a Disney-like, thing, right? And you would be able to show how you were manipulating it, to behave differently. Here's the left hand, right hand molecule. Here's the, whatever. It was pretty impressive, right, what they had. And it wasn't just for demonstration purposes, that they were actually, they had teams that went into this that would live inside the structure and think about how could we, improve it, right? Because, being immersed in that chemistry was different than, looking at it on a screen, right? So
It's like swallowing the capsule and have it go into your stomach, and then it projects a video for the physician. When I worked in pharmaceuticals, Roche Labs actually had like a simulation like this for the GI tract, and then checking out the GI tract and then the colon, and you're like,
yeah, 100%.
you were immersed, like you were literally, but it was real, like it wasn't a cartoon. You were literally looking at the body fluids and yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that all of the Japanese optical companies, Ricoh, Canon, so on and so forth, that I've worked, Olympus, that I've worked with over the years, a lot of their revenue stream has shifted from, the camera business that they started in, or copiers and other things, right, to medical devices, because it's much higher, mission critical, higher expensive to miniaturize.
Yeah, $7 billion is medical expenses here in the United States.
Yeah.
Trillion, 7 trillion.
Yeah. So when I talk to pharmaceutical companies today, the larger ones that are incumbents, that have long development pipelines, the first question that I ask them is, how many physicists do you have on staff in development? And they go, we have chemists. Okay. I said, you have a problem, right? I can tell you right now, you have a problem, right? Because the packaging of what you make is going to change, and a lot of that is going to have to do, with physics more than chemistry. And there's going to be a change in how we do, how we treatment, right? Because right now, if there are drugs that are dilating veins and vessels in your body, right, to create more capacity, reduce blockages, right, so on and so forth, for because you have a lifetime of plaque that is accumulated around those. The next generation of treatment is going to be a crawler, a micro miniaturized nanotechnology crawler that's going to go and remove the plaque, all right, and basically turn the clock back and say, I'm going to give you a rejuvenated circulatory system, right? I'll get rid of the plaque, I'll deposit it someplace else. I said, that stuff is not chemistry, that's physics, okay? And
Mhm.
you're going to need to start to grok that, because there will be a when all of your current treatments become obsolete. There'll be a cliff, right, where it just falls off, and people have access to that. All right. And you need to actually start participating in those disintermediations today. All right. And it's kind of like, oh boy, this is really disruptive to our business model. Yeah, I know. But Kodak invented the digital camera and said, well, screw that. All right. And I said, we're going to stay with developing film. It's so lucrative. So, I'm just giving them a preview of something that they need to start thinking about. And a lot of times they don't want to think of, complex adaptive systems at that level. Well, okay, fine. All right.
Yeah, going back to the digital twin, I wrote about this in 2020 a lot of, when can you, if you can track everything, like right now Tesla's tracking, shadowing their drivers to see how the best drivers drive, to then simulate, AI driver, right?
Right.
And like your conversation with Mike, right? And you shadow that. So Elon Musk, or excuse me, Lex Friedman, he's been doing a lot of interviews with people about nuclear war. And in fact, his comment was, "I'm going to vote for the person who I think is least likely to get us into a nuclear war." And I thought, actually, I'm going to make that same decision, and I can steel man either of the two major candidates right now, either way. But the thing is, if I could vote for anyone, and if I had anyone who had the best temperament, leadership, rhetoric, it would be Eisenhower. So what I'm thinking of doing is creating an AI Eisenhower, AI Ike, that would say, okay, how did he keep us out of nuclear war in the 1950s? And, if we had an AI Eisenhower, in fact, since I live in Kansas and my vote doesn't matter for president, it's not a swing state, I'm gonna write in Dwight Eisenhower for my vote for president. But it's kind of like, okay, how would Eisenhower approach this, right? And if we had an AI Eisenhower, so I'm actually thinking of creating an AI Ike. Like Eisenhower had atoms for peace. I'm going to do atoms and AI for peace and prosperity versus war and wasteland, right? And so how did Eisenhower think about this? And then how would he respond? And what I'd like to do is like get this, because here in Kansas we have the Eisenhower Library, have scholars who've studied Eisenhower, and how would, maybe even this AI could have an interview with Lex Friedman, or Friedman. And how would he, then, if does this reflect the voice of Eisenhower, right? And the spirit of Eisenhower. So could you do that, and would it move the needle, whether it's President Biden or President Trump or whoever becomes president, by having, thinking about how Eisenhower dealt with the chances of nuclear war in the 50s and 1950s, can we solve it in the 2020s?
Yeah, I might suggest, and this is going to be provocative, so I certainly don't want to see it happen, but we have an entire generation of people who do not remember the horrors of nuclear war because we haven't done it recently. All right. I think that mutually assured destruction worked because we had some on the planet, right, horrors that were actually, held forth, right? And people kind of go, holy shit, this is horrible, right? I mean, we better not do this, right? I am of the opinion that until some rogue actor actually uses a nuclear weapon again against a population, that we're not going to be awakened to those horrors, because they're receding memories, right? And mutually assured destruction does not work unless you actually understand how horrible it is, right?
Right.
So I think that there is going to, emerge somewhere some idiot that will actually do this. It's not likely to be one of the existing, big arsenal, things. I don't even think it's going to be, one of these, oh, I'll just use a little tactical nuke, kind of thing. I
No.
think it's going to be a rogue actor, right? And then we will see, some population, wink out of existence in a moment, right? Because the thing about 9/11 and other things is that instantaneously in a moment, you just get, a lot of people. That's what was shocking, about, some recent events. All right.
Right.
It's not incremental. It's instantaneous. And you kind of go, oh my God. So I'm just saying that the way that mass psychology works is we haven't been reminded recently of, because we only
Yeah.
see it in fiction. Okay.
Right.
So you become, numb to it because, it's been fictionalized. Well, okay.
Well, I'm hoping, not that I want a
I don't want it.
100-meter asteroid to hit the Earth, but if
Yeah.
we had 100 or 500-meter asteroid hit the Earth, maybe then people would put some technology, effort
Doug?
into avoiding
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
10-kilometer asteroid, right?
Because-
So
Go ahead.
Doug, on your comment before with Lex, when I've also read the Annie Jacobson's, are you
Yes.
talking?
yeah,
Oh, I mean, now she takes the past and puts it into the present and the future. I mean,
right.
if have you had a chance, Kevin, to watch that interview? It's really long, but she just, oh gosh, she discusses just how easy
The horrors of nuclear
No,
war.
I understand that, but I'm pointing out that we can jawbone our way, because there are a lot of people who will talk about this stuff and how horrible it is. There is no substitute for the horror itself.
Well, it's kind of like if you have a heart attack and survive, you're much more likely to do the right thing, start doing diet and exercise.
I know. I mean,
Like you almost need something, hopefully that's not killing you, so that it makes you do something better, so you actually have a longer life.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, being diagnosed pre-diabetic, right, has put me on a really good path, right, to never wanting to go over the threshold and to keep on backing off, right?
Right.
So I know enough people who have, you know, diabetes that requires treatment, right, to not want to actually, cross over that I need to, exercise and do the things. But I have another motivation is I like to ski. And so even when I'm not in ski season, I have to keep myself healthy enough that I can get back up on the mountain. Right.
Okay.
So that's
We're gonna need to go skiing together sometime, Kevin.
Well, Mike's a good skier too. So
Oh, you are? We're gonna need to do a ski trip.
I've got my passes for Vail next week. So in any
Oh,
event,
at Vail,
Schneider,
okay.
thank you for being with us, my friend. And we're at the top of our time. Are any concluding comments as we finish our call? Suzanne, anything you want to leave us with?
It was really an awesome conversation. I really like these a lot. This is where, just Mike, with just being able to have that endless infinite hallway or trapped in the elevator together, you know what I mean, where you could bounce. It's just cool. There are days like I don't want the meetings to end. There, these.
Well, we're delighted that you could be with us as always. Mike, anything you want to say as we conclude? No, your mic's grumpy. So let me go to Doug, and you can reestablish connectivity. Doug?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this. And actually I'm looking forward to the candy. I just downloaded it on my to listen to your podcast and podcasts, people on average listen to it about an hour a day. It's
Right.
just this kind of like what we're hearing right now, right? That we're
Oh, yeah.
getting
Yeah.
these connections. So, I'm excited about technology that allows us to have good conversations. So appreciate Kevin and
Yeah.
Mike to having this today.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Mike? No, you're just going. So
Sometimes technology
something
doesn't work.
is not right with your connection, my friend. So, I would say something for you, but I can't read your mind yet. Okay, we need those Musk chips. Okay, so I could,
Or an AI mic.
yeah.
AI mic.
Yeah, it really is not working. So thanks everyone for being with us. Ask better questions, and in everything you do, be intentional. We'll talk again soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks.
Cheers.